Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar on the fascinating country that is India, and in particular, the wonderful region at the very north of the country, Kashmir. My name's Jonny Bealby. I founded Wild Frontiers, and I'm delighted to be talking about a country and a region that is close to my heart. Indeed, one could say that a journey through India and Kashmir back in the late 80s put me on a direct path to setting up Wild Frontiers and probably sitting here tonight. So there we are. And what a fascinating country it is, and great to see so many people signed up for this webinar, over 600 people, which is fantastic and just shows how interesting India and in particular Kashmir is. So if you're watching live, very welcome. If you are watching on catch up on YouTube, you are equally welcome. And we hope that you find tonight's talk interesting and illuminating, and indeed will make you want to travel there. So first, let me just explain a little bit about how this evening's going to go. First of all, I'm going to do what I usually do, which is tell you a little bit about my own backstory, how I got to set up Wild Frontiers. Then I will talk about my recent trip to India. I was there in March, end of March, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of India post-COVID, what the experience was like, both getting into India and indeed traveling around India. So that mainly takes me through Rajasthan. And then from there, we are going to head north, as I did, and head up to Kashmir for an in-depth look at what to me is one of the most fascinating places on earth, really. So we're also going to do a poll. Now, that's something I normally forget to do, even though Mike sets them up. So we're definitely going to do that tonight. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom. Mike's with us tonight, hiding behind the scenes, but he'll appear a bit later. He'll field those questions and feed them back to me so that I can hopefully answer them. That'll be at the end. And then, of course, tomorrow, we will send out an email, as we normally do, with links both to this video, this webinar, so you can watch it again or share it with friends. There'll also be links to various trips and other things that we think you might find interesting. So you've only got me tonight, I should say. Those of you that are used to watching our webinars will know that we quite often have a mixture of people. But tonight, you've only got me. So I hope I can keep you entertained and informed as we go through this evening. So without further ado, let me share my screen and then we can crack on. So that is, I think, the end of the video. So there we are. Yes, as I say, I'm Jonny Bealby. I founded Wild Frontiers after a decade of travels back in the 90s. Early 90s, I drove a motorbike right the way around Africa. I then walked through parts of India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. And then I rode a horse along the Silk Road, 3,000 miles from Kashgar to the Caspian Sea. That gave rise to my 3 travel books, which is Running with the Moon, about the motorcycle journey, For a Pagan Song, In the Footsteps of the Man Who Would Be King, travels in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and Silk Dreams, Troubled Road, about the horse riding journey. And of course, all that gave rise to Wild Frontiers. And I've been running this business now for 24 years. Next year will be our 25th anniversary, which is pretty exciting. India. India has been not just a huge part of the Wild Frontiers story. It's our biggest destination. It's where we send most people. It's been a part of my life ever since I can remember. Again, my mum was born there. My grandfather lived there before the war. And we used to get lots of stories of India as in our childhood. And I've been, going back there time and time again. We set up an office in 2010, and therefore I go pretty much every year. So to have not been to India for, I think I went in November 2019. So I didn't go for almost 2.5 years, which is by far the longest period that I have not been in India for. And I was, struggling as a result. Anyway, as soon as the protocols were dropped or made easier, I got my ticket and I got off on the road to India. And this was the journey I did through the main part of India. You can see Jammu and Kashmir at the top of the map there, but this was the journey I did primarily to get a grasp on how things were after the pandemic. As I say, we send a lot of people to India, so it's important to know just how India was recovering and what the experience would be like for our clients. So I thought I would go to Delhi, where our office is, and meet the team there, and then head down to Agra, go through a new hotel called Six Senses, which I'll talk about, through Bundy and Bijapur, and end up in Udaipur before heading up to Kashmir. So before we do it, I thought I'd better put this slide in, otherwise I knew I'd forget again. So before we get stuck into this story, let's just do a poll and see, well, the question will become very clear. Here you go. So India and Kashmir poll. Have you visiting India and Kashmir? I have been to India, but not Kashmir. I have been to India and Kashmir. I haven't been to India or Kashmir. So let's just let that run through for a bit. That's almost everyone that's on tonight's call has voted. Let's just give it a couple more seconds. Good. Okay, let's end the poll. So I can still see a couple more people voting. Okay, let's end the poll there and share results. So I have been to India but not Kashmir. That is by far the most, 62%. I have been to India and Kashmir, 25%. That's great. And I haven't been to India or Kashmir. That's good as well, because I hope that tonight we can persuade those of you to go to India, if not Kashmir, and those that have been to India but not Kashmir to go to Kashmir. So that's great. That's really interesting to know. Okay, so let's just carry on then. So let's talk about India post-pandemic and what it was actually like to get in there. The simple answer to that is very easy. Once you've got your visa, now, for reasons known only to the Indian authorities, if you are Canadian or British, you are still not able to use their e-visa service, which means you can get a visa in a very short period of time, under a week. So for us Brits and Canadians, we have to go through a slightly lengthier process, which is how it used to be, where we have to have an appointment. Now, the easiest way to do this is through a visa agency. It's not that expensive. And it's by far the simplest way. The wait in the UK at the moment, I was talking to my friend at Travcore, who gets a lot of our visas. He was telling me it's about 3 weeks at the moment, and then they do the appointment for you. They get your visa, and in a month you're good to go. So just bear that in mind. We're going to talk about some trips going in July and August and September. So obviously, if you were interested in those trips, you would need to get your skates on as far as getting the visa is concerned. If you're coming from the UK, if you're coming from America or Europe or just about anywhere else, you can apply for an e-visa and you'll get it in no time. So once you've got your e-visa or your visa, what do you need to do? Well, there's only one form you've got to fill in, and that is your Air Suvidar form, which is similar to the old British passenger locator form, although a lot simpler, I should say. And on that form, which asks a few questions, you've then just got to upload your vaccination certificate. And as long as you're double vaccinated, you will get that signed off and you're ready to enter India. This is what I saw when I entered India. As you can see, it was pretty quiet. I haven't seen the arrivals hall in Delhi airport like that for a long time. And I was with my visa. That was the one positive of having to get your visa, is that you didn't have to wait in the e-visa queue. So I was whistled through in no time, and out on the concourse, I met my dear friend, JP Sharma, who runs our office in Delhi. He was there to pick me up. That was it, really. It was incredibly straightforward. It still is. I suspect the Air Suvidar form will be dropped in due course. And what I should also say, even though I didn't know it at the time, I arrived on the 22nd of March. On the 31st of March, the government announced that all COVID restrictions were being dropped. So that was basically it. And the reason for that is that they've been pretty successful. Everyone will have seen, I'm sure, just how badly India was affected by the pandemic. There were some terrible scenes there in kind of May 2021, and then again in January 2022. But you can see here the case numbers dropped off radically. So at the peak, I think there were 350,000 cases a day, 400,000 in 2021, but in January 2022, 350,000 cases a day. That's now dropped to 2,000 cases a day. Now, when you think that Britain is running at about 25,000 cases a day, America 140,000 cases a day, you can see that India is pretty much well on the way to kind of putting this horrendous pandemic behind it. And that was certainly the impression I got when I was there. One of the reasons for that is the most stupendous, probably the most successful vaccination program on the planet. They have vaccinated almost 2 billion times. Now, of course, they've got a big population, so they need to do that, but they've been extraordinary in their rollout of vaccinations. You can see here, 1.92 billion vaccines rolled out, 64% of the population fully vaccinated. And given India's makeup and the different kind of disparate places where people live, it probably won't get much higher than that, I suspect. And I also know that about 4% of the vulnerable have been boosted. So India's done a great job of getting over the pandemic and coming out the other side. And that's what I found when I was there. So I was in Delhi, as I say. I went to our office. I spent time there meeting the team and seeing how they all were. And then I just went around as a normal tourist, and I went to see Humayun's tomb, which you can see on the left, and I took a stroll through Lodi Gardens. And then in the evening, I went for a walk through one of the night markets. At this stage, on the 23rd of March, there was a rule that you should wear a face mask in public. Now, about 50% of the people I saw were wearing face masks. No more than that, and it seemed to be fairly arbitrary. Delhi was very quiet generally. There were 0 Western tourists, so that made it rather lovely. Yeah, it was very easy and no problem at all. It was also 42 degrees, which is quite hot. So I headed down to Agra. Well, that's a place you can go to 100 times, which I've almost been to, I should think, and it's absolutely amazing. Unbeknown to me, one of the main reasons why I wanted to go to Agra was because I wanted to see how quiet it was, given that tourism obviously hasn't really kicked off yet. What I didn't know was that I was going on the second day of the school holidays. So it was actually quite busy, as you can see with the picture on the left. That's no problem, though, because one of the things I love to do in Agra is go to the other side of the Yamuna River to a beautiful little park, which has got a little seating area. Very few people know about it. Very few people bother to go. I was there for half an hour on my own, took this lovely picture with the water buffaloes in the foreground. It's just a great way to sit. If you've got time, unfortunately, I didn't have that day, then you just want to be there for sunset. And as the sun sets down to the right of that picture, it turns the dome beautiful pink. It's absolutely magical. But you can see, as I say, Taj Mahal many times, and it never ceases to amaze. Plenty of people there. Again, once I left Delhi, I hardly saw anyone wearing a face mask. This was business as usual. India, right back to where it was pre-pandemic. So from there, I had been invited to visit a rather lovely new hotel by Six Senses called Fort Barwara. Anybody that knows the Six Senses brand will know that they are kind of focused on wellness, on spas, on a general kind of lifestyle tourism, which was rather nice. I have to say, it's not my kind of default position to have spa treatments and that sort of thing. Those of you that know me will know that I'm probably more of an adventure boy than I am a massage boy. But anyway, you know, take one for the team, do as you must, and check these things out because our customers will want to know. And it was fabulous, absolutely amazing. And sorry, something's just popped up. And it's really incredible because the actual old fort was almost completely derelict. There was very little left of it other than the main fortress walls. And Sixth Senses have done an incredible job. And I must say, spent millions on turning it into one of the most beautiful hotels. There are no bedrooms, there are only suites. You've got this fabulous swimming pool, which goes inside and out. One good thing about it, although you can have a salad, you can also gorge yourself on some beautiful Indian food. So that was a great little place to stay. I should say it's 45 minutes, sorry, from Ranthambore. So you can kind of use it if you want to go and see the tiger parks. And from there, I headed down to, whoops, what's going on here? Sorry. From there, I headed down into more familiar territory, if you like, which is Bundy and Bijaipur. These are two of my old haunts. I've been going for years. Wild Frontiers has run numerous trips through these places. And this is your kind of off the beaten track Rajasthan. Bundy, you can see the palace there on the right-hand side, sorry, on the left-hand side. Absolutely stunning palace. It's going through some renovation, which is wonderful. It's been done really thoughtfully. And the murals inside the palace are really, really famous. The Bundy School of Art, which was at the end of the 1500s, beginning of the 1600s, so the beginning of the 17th century, are really famous. And actually a week after I was there was a team from the Victoria and Albert Museum that had come to assess them and work out what restoration they needed. So that was fabulous. The picture on the right is in the Bundy Market. There's a really lovely market in Bundy. It's a really authentic town. You don't get many tourists there. So it's a really proper old Indian town. It's got a lovely stepwell. It's got a great vegetable market. It's got this beautiful flower bazaar. It's got a couple of really nice places to stay. It always, to me, reminds me of how Udaipur was 30 odd years ago when I first started traveling there. And then, of course, on to Bijaipur. And again, those of you that know me will know my story with Bijaipur goes back 20 years. Rao Narendra Singh there on the left of the picture with Moji, his son, and JP and me enjoying a good old evening catch up. And this is where you can really explore rural India. You know, I love the cities, don't get me wrong. Jodhpur, Jaipur, Udaipur, they're magnificent places with incredible architecture and great attractions. But for me, it's getting into the rural parts that really, you know, accentuates the beauty of India. This is India of my childhood imagination. My grandmother sitting me on her lap and telling me about rural India. This is the India that I love, the kind of Kipling-esque India. You get in a Jeep, you go for a Jeep safari, you'll see the people in the fields, you'll go through the villages where you'll get stopped by cattle and out into the lakes. It's just stunning. And part of this is part of one of our signature trips called India in Slow Motion, where we kind of take a slower route through Rajasthan and into Madhya Pradesh. And on the November departure, which I highly recommend, you get to go to the Chandrabhaga Animal Fair. Now, I'm sure many of you will have heard of the Pushkar Camel Fair. This happens on the same full moon night with the same tribal people, the Rabari that you can see here. But at this, you will find less than 100 tourists. At the Pushkar Camel Fair, you will find many thousand tourists. So this is fantastic. And it just so happens that we're very good friends with the local Maharaja who lives in Jalawar, which is where this camel fair takes place. And we stay at his beautiful palace, so which we kind of take over. So great place to stay, great thing to do. And it's just a different kind of India. And then, of course, I ended up in Udaipur. Well, who doesn't want to go to Udaipur many, many times? I'm very fortunate that I must have been to Udaipur 30 or 40 times. One never tires of it. It is without doubt one of the most beautiful towns on earth. Lake Pichola in front and the beautiful city palace. And then, of course, you have the lake palace in the middle of the lake. It's just a beautiful place to hang out, to go for a walk through the narrow streets and see the vendors selling their stuff. And of course, in the evening, sit and have a lovely meal overlooking the splendor of the city palace. Many of our trips end or start in Udaipur. So, you know, look at Taj Temples and Tigers, for instance. That one will give you some time there. So that was my kind of trip through India proper, if you like, through Rajasthan. And what I found was that a place that had completely recovered from COVID. What was interesting, and this is a kind of very important point, on my trip, I was kind of wondering about the quality of the hotels, about the guides, about the restaurants. You know, how had they survived? Because obviously they haven't had any international tourism for over 2 years. But what was evident was that the domestic market, the Indian tourists traveling within their own country, had really kept this going. And so, you know, checking out hotels and meeting our usual guides, they were right on it, and there was really no difference. So the Indian tourist market has kept the local Indian travel industry alive, and that's great. So when you do go back, if you go this October, November, next February, March, you will find a really good service waiting for you. So that was really my main agenda, and it worked out perfectly. Right, let's head north, as I did. I forget which day it was, but basically I flew from Udaipur to Delhi and bounced straight up to Kashmir. Now, at Kashmir, it's almost impossible to write an original word about the beauty of Kashmir. People have been waxing lyrical about this little valley for millennia, often compared to Switzerland, the Austrian Tyrol, the Italian lakes, but most have compared it to the Garden of Eden. But sadly, it's not as if this beauty has brought Kashmir or its people much happiness. As one writer put it, the story of Kashmir is rather like some lurid Victorian novel in which the heroine's rare beauty brings her nothing but disappointment and unhappiness. Over the centuries, many have coveted this region, and generally the Kashmiris have suffered as a result. So just to show you exactly where it is, the Veil of Kashmir sits at the 400 miles north of Delhi. The outer blue circle, the white of the egg, if you like, is Kashmir, is the whole of Kashmir, part of which is now in Pakistan and part of which, of course, is controlled by India. And the inner circle, the yolk, that is the Veil of Kashmir. Now that is 84 miles long and about 25 miles wide, making it about the same size as Holland. Interestingly, it sits at a unique position as the epicenter of three of the world's main religions. So you have Islam to the west, you have Buddhism to the east, and you have Hinduism to the south. And like Jerusalem, it has sacred relics for many of those faiths. So the Prophet's hair is said to be housed in the Hazrat Bal Mosque, which you can see there top right. The famous ice Shiva Lingam that sits in the hills above Srinagar is there and has a pilgrimage, the Amarnath pilgrimage, which takes over a million people a year come to visit that. And then there are even some that say Jesus didn't die in Jerusalem, but he was taken alive and spent out his days in Srinagar. Probably a long story, but some believe that. And the valley floor of Kashmir is a beautiful agricultural paradise. It produces all manner of fruit and veg and food. But it was primarily the hills and the lakes that drew people to Kashmir. And it was Akbar the Great, the greatest of all the Mogul rulers, who first of all cast his eyes towards this beautiful vale. Up until then, it had been ruled by a line of despotic Turks, relations of the sultans from Delhi. But in 1556, Akbar invaded and captured Kashmir, and so began one of its few golden ages. And what they came for the artisans, they came for the hunting, they built their forts, they built their palaces, they built their mosques, and of course they built their famous gardens. This is the Hari Parbat fort on the left. On the right is the Peri Mahal palace. You have the Jama Masjid mosque in the middle of the old town, which is famous for its incredible cedar pillars, and you have the Shalamar Gardens there on the right. And one could almost say that this put Kashmir as one of the world's first tourist destinations, because it wasn't just the Mughal court that migrated up into Kashmir every summer. With the court came everyone that needed to keep the court going, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So it was doctors, teachers, publicans, blacksmiths, you name it. The whole of kind of Delhi transmigrated up to Kashmir. And they they took their elephants, they took huge tented camps, and they spent the summer months away from the blistering heat of the plains. But it was as the Mughal Empire disintegrated, the Sikhs became very powerful, and under Ranjit Singh took over a large part of the Punjab, and indeed took over the Kashmir as well. And this was seen as a pretty bad period for Kashmiris. The Sikhs put in charge a line of despotic governors who treated the Muslim Kashmiris as slaves. In fact, they treated them worse than cattle. If you killed a Kashmiri, you were fined. If you killed a cow, you were hung. And then they took 9/10 of the crops as tax and then sold it back to the people at exorbitant rates. Needless to say, this was an era that was punctuated by famine, cholera epidemics, and even a severe earthquake. But thankfully, it only lasted 27 years, as in 1849, the British brought to an end what was known as the Anglo-Sikh Wars. There were two of them. At the end of the second one, the British won the war against the Sikhs, which meant that they got Kashmir. They didn't really want to take any more land over in terms of fully controlling it. So the Maharaja, the Hindu Maharaja, I should say, because this is very important, the Hindu Maharaja of Jammu, a chap called Gulab Singh, said to the British that he would pay the reparations on behalf of the Sikhs if they ceded Kashmir to him. He paid 7.5 million rupees. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm not quite sure how much that is in today's money, but probably quite a lot of money. 7.5 million rupees plus an annual payment of 1 horse and 6 shawl goats and 3 pairs of Kashmiri shawls. Now, bear in mind, in Victorian Britain, pashminas were all the rage, so they're not just a modern phenomenon. And he then got Kashmir. So that was how a Hindu Maharaja became the ruler of the Muslim state of Kashmir. Now, had the British not done that deal and gone on to rule Kashmir as they ruled the Punjab and many other parts of India, we probably wouldn't have the problems that we have today. But they didn't. This is, bearing in mind, this is the end of the 1840s. Don't forget, the 1841 was the first Afghan war fiasco, where we've been kind of wiped out there. They were really being stretched, and if they could have somebody that they could rely on that was loyal to Britain, looking after a region, that was good enough. They were happy to have that. So that's what happened. Gulab Singh, Hindu Maharaja, takes over the Veil of Kashmir. With that movement, the Brits moved in. They loved it. Suddenly they had a place to go and party and have fun and holiday. They went up there. They loved the gardens, of course. They went camping, they went hunting, they went to church, and they made these houseboats. Now, because they didn't own Kashmir, didn't rule Kashmir, they weren't allowed to own property. So what they did instead was built these houseboats and lived on those. And the type of houseboats they had, you can see on here on the right, top right picture. The reason why they made them like this was because they were quite easy then to transport. You could paddle them upstream, up the Jhelum River, out of one of the main lakes in Srinagar, and up towards other lakes further afield, and go on your hunting and camping trips. So they thoroughly enjoyed it. And that, of course, was all well and good until partition, 14th of August, 1947. So almost exactly 75 years ago. And that put in place a chain of events that leads us really to where we are today. Of course, under the rules of partition, the princely states, as they were known, the places ruled by Maharajas, were pretty much allowed to choose whether they wanted to cede to Pakistan, which of course was East and West Pakistan, East Pakistan now being Bangladesh, or stay with India. The Hindu Maharaja, Hari Singh, who was the great nephew of Gulab Singh, who had become the Maharaja because the great nephew, great Ghulam's son had remained childless, Rambir. He took over and he didn't know what to do. At that same time, 2,000 Pathan tribesmen invaded from Pakistan. Hari Singh panicked, dashed down to Delhi, saw Nehru, said to Nehru, "What do I do?" Nehru said, "Well, you concede it to India and I'll send troops to push these people out, but only if you do that." So as soon as the signature was dry on the paper, Nehru sent troops up, pushed the Pathan tribesmen back out, and that resulted in a split Kashmir, which is where we are today with the line of control. So, as I say, that's the de facto position. It was directly after this, the matter was put to the United Nations, who decided that Pakistan should withdraw and a plebiscite should be held as to what the Kashmiris wanted for their future. But the Pakistanis refused to withdraw. India refused to allow the vote, and this stalemate continues to today. So that is how we got to this split Kashmir. So everything in green there is Pakistan. Now I'm going there next week. So I'll be up in the green part of Pakistan next week. In March, I was in the orange part of Kashmir, which, so that's both sides of it. And unfortunately, one can't cross between the two. It's a kind of de facto border. It's been like this since 1947, and who knows, we'll probably stay like this for quite a while yet. And of course, that has caused big problems for this region. There were rigged elections at the end of the 80s, which caused a big problem, and basically an insurrection occurred, which saw a massive kind of movement against Indian rule. That resulted in anywhere between 60,000 and 100,000 deaths. And during that decade of the 90s, it was pretty much impossible to go there. India and Pakistan have fought 3 wars, at least 2 over the Kashmir issue. And so all the way up to the kind of early 2000s, it's caused a big problem. We were all delighted when suddenly kind of things started to thaw. So 2004, there were better elections, which were more open and free. Musharraf there and Vajpayee, the Indian Prime Minister, decided to get together and to try to ease tensions. And a number of things happened. Things like friendship buses were put on. I actually traveled on the very first friendship bus between Lahore and Delhi back in 1990. Oh, hang on a minute, what year was it? 1998, 1999, something like that. Then cricket matches started up again between the two countries. And if it's not quite a love story, certainly there was a thawing of relations and things started to improve. And my own story started to change. So here you can see on the top left is a picture of me in Kashmir at a houseboat in 1989 with my then girlfriend. Now, I won't go into that story, but any of you that know me will know that this is a fairly pivotal moment in my life. If you want to know about it, read my first book, Running with the Moon. I then took my first group back up there in 2004, which is on the right. I took my wife up there in 2012, and I've traveled up to Kashmir, I don't know how many times, probably 7 or 8 times. That picture, I think, was taken, bottom right was taken in about 2016, I think. And we've been running trips to Kashmir ever since 2004. Now, it does go through its periods of insecurity and its periods of tourism boom. And in my opinion, that's what we're going through at the moment. So people always want to know, is Kashmir safe? And it is a difficult question to answer because obviously it depends partly on your kind of your own risk aversions, but it also depends very much kind of on the day. What I would say is that the issues regarding tourism are largely unaffected by what goes on with the issues regarding kind of the security situation. And there's no question that the security situation has improved radically over the last well, you can say certainly the last 2 decades. The 90s were pretty awful, and that was not a time to be in Kashmir. As I say, we've been running trips there since 2004. What I found when I went back up there in March was that it was a boom period for tourism. The Indian tourist market is huge. Literally thousands and thousands of people are arriving and leaving every day for tourism purposes. On the day that I arrived, 45 planes arrived from various Indian cities, bringing Indian tourists into Srinagar. And it's an amazing spectacle. Now, if you think that's going to put you off, don't, because it's incredible, Srinagar, at dissipating people. They just disappear. So you don't really notice them. Of course, there are certain points like this photograph on the right, which is where there's a kind of almost like a floating shopping area where a lot of the houseboats are. And that's where you get quite a grouping of the shikaras going around taking Indian tourists on their paddles in the evening. But generally speaking, you don't really get to notice too many. Thousands and thousands going, thousands and thousands having great fun, thousands, traveling without any care for their security at all. I've written to the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office stopped its advice against travel to Srinagar back in 2012, and then put it back on again in about 2018. And I've written to them to say, I think the advice is outdated again and that it should be removed, because I think at the moment, Srinagar is wonderful and a great place to visit. The reasons for that are numerous, really. I think the Indian government, after revoking Article 370, have reduced troop numbers and taken away a lot of the roadblocks and stuff that you used to find there. You can see this soldier here eating an ice cream. He's hardly worried about security. The Kashmiri people love to do what they love to do, which is bargain and haggle with the tourists and make some money. The other important thing to mention is that Kashmir has never been taken over by an extremist ideology. The Kashmiris practice a kind of Sufi style of Islam, and it's never been hijacked by more extremist Wahhabist kind of ideas that you might find elsewhere. And the other thing to really mention is that it's never been about that. It's always been an independence struggle. There are far fewer militants than there ever were. There are far fewer incidents than there ever were. And it's just worth remembering that no Westerner has been harmed in Kashmir since 1995. And there's been no attack on any Indian tourists since 2008. So we're talking a long time back. What you can get, and this is something you need to be aware of, is that you can get disturbances. And that can affect your holiday insofar as there might be a curfew on traveling into the old town, for example, which might stop you going to see the mosques and that sort of thing. When I was there, everything was open and I went and, did my normal thing and looked around everywhere. But that's really where the problems are, not really as far as I'm concerned. And of course, this is only my opinion, in terms of actual security for you as an individual. So anyway, let's move on and tell you what you actually do in Kashmir, because it is a stunning place. So Kashmir today, first of all, it's about the lakes. That's what everyone went up there for. Oops, sorry, I need to tell you what you have to do to get in, although this slide I found out today is a little bit obscure now. So you fly up there, you can drive in 2 directions. I'll talk about those in a minute. When you arrive as a foreigner, you have to register, which you have always had to do. Even back in the late 80s, you had to do that. What you also had to do, not just as a foreigner, but everybody had to take a COVID test when you arrived, which was a very haphazard affair where he hardly even got the thing up my nose and stuck it into his test tube. But you did have to do that. However, I've just spoken to a friend of mine in Kashmir today, and that's now been dropped. So you don't have to do that. All you have to do is register and you're good to go. And then you get out into Srinagar. And as I was saying, it's the lakes that are the most beautiful thing. The houseboat that I was staying on, which I will show you images of later, is right up in the top right there, looking out over the beautiful Dal Lake with the mountains all around. You have the kind of the lower foothills, and then above you have the snow-capped peaks. And that's the quintessential beauty of Kashmir. You get in a shikara, you go for a paddle, and it's the most gentle, relaxing, beautiful thing. you can ever do. Not only do you go out on the open lakes, you go through the canals, a bit like kind of Venice or something, where you go through the old town, you stop off and see the bakers or some of the artisans making carvings and that sort of thing. You can see this guy on the left is bringing his vegetables home. The lady bottom right is a honey seller. She sells all kinds of different flavored honeys. So, you know, you paddle around and just enjoy yourself. You go into the old town, which for me is absolutely fascinating. This is like kind of London before the fire. Narrow streets, almost kind of wooden Tudor-like buildings, old Hindu temples, old tombs, the people going about their business. You also can go and visit the three main mosques of Srinagar. So you have the Hazrat Bal Mosque, bottom right. You have the Jama Masjid, top right, which is famous for its cedar columns. And you have the Shah Hamdan Mosque, which is the main picture there, which is absolutely beautiful. It looks more like a Buddhist pagoda, but it's absolutely stunning. There's the floating vegetable market to go and see. This does mean getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, jumping in your shikara and being paddled off to the floating vegetable market, but that's a great spectacle. This is where all the sabzi-wallahs, as they're known, or vegetable sellers, come and sell and buy their wares. They might be houseboat owners, they might be just families, or they might be vegetable sellers, and they come and trade, which is really interesting and a good photo op. And then, of course, you've got the Mogul Gardens, and there are 4 of them in Srinagar. There's the, 3 of them in Srinagar mainly. There's Nishat Bagh, there is the Chashma Shahi, and there is the most famous Shalamar Gardens, which is this photograph. I took this photograph at the end of March, so that kind of shows you when the blossom is out. Absolutely stunning. And the Shalamar Gardens have been enjoyed since the Mughal times. The Brits, as I say, when I went last time, it was they were actually under reconstruction, and so it was a little bit disappointing, but now they're all open and looking fabulous. You can go and visit with the artisans. This is what Kashmir is really famous for: the carpet makers, the weavers, the potters, the copper workers. The chap bottom left is making one of the famous pashminas. These 4 gentlemen bottom right are making a massive carpet that the owner of the shop told me had been commissioned by somebody in Houston, Texas. So he must have a very, very big house, because it's an enormous carpet. It's going to take 4 of them 4 years to make. And the lady there is spinning the wool for the pashminas. And it's famous for the products that it produces. The pashminas, that's my wife buying a pashmina, top right, selling the arts and crafts. And one of the shops, Suffering Moses, opened in 1846, I think. Cruel embroidery, that's what the chap's doing top right, and then of course the papier-mâché. These are all famous and regionalized, kind of unique geographical accreditations for these particular skills, which is great. So where do you stay? Well, as I say, the houseboats are the obvious place. There are about 2,500 of them dotted around Dal Lake and Nagin Lake next door. And they are, as I say, a byproduct of the British rule there 100 odd years ago, 150 years ago. And they're fabulous. The most fabulous is Sukoon Houseboat, which is on Dal Lake, and it is absolutely stupendous. It's beautiful. It looks out across the lake. It has a lovely terrace on the rooftop. Beautiful bedrooms. You can see the bathroom would be perfectly okay in a 5-star hotel. In the evening, musicians come and play on the top. You get beautiful breakfasts and dinners and a lovely living room as well. Also, incredibly good Wi-Fi, which was rather handy. Another really good group of houseboats is the Royal Palace Group, which we use for our groups on a slightly different part of Dal Lake. Slightly more traditional look to these houseboats, but again, absolutely beautiful, exquisitely carved rosewood and pine, really beautiful. Good bathrooms as well. Here's my first ever group there enjoying their dinner. If you don't fancy staying on a houseboat, or you want to mix and match, there are good bits of accommodation as well as the houseboat. So you have the Taj, which is called the Dal View, which opened about 7 or 8 years ago. You have the Lalit, which is one of the Maharaja's palaces. And you have the newly opened Karan Mahal. Now, I stayed here for a night and I absolutely loved it. This is the palace of Hari Singh's father, Karam Singh. So this is the old Hindu Maharaja's place. It's a beautiful old manor house. It overlooks Dal Lake. This was my bedroom. That's the living room. There's the restaurant. Absolutely stunning. So if you want to kind of not be on a houseboat, this, for my money, is the best option. Oh, I say that, other than perhaps Kayamgar, which literally, I took these photographs about a week before it opened. It opened on the 6th of May. Sorry, so a month before it opened. Absolutely stunning. This is set up by a friend of mine up in the hills in the Dashigam National Park. So you can see there the infinity swimming pool overlooking Dal Lake, really spectacular rooms. And I know it will have incredible food and everything else. And you can go for wonderful walks here up into the hills. You get, in the winter, you'll get snow leopards. In the summer, there'll be a bear and all sorts of different beautiful animals, eagles and one thing and another. So that's Srinagar. Outside of Srinagar, there are a number of other places to see. Gulmarg is the most obvious, which is the main kind of mountain region that people go to. It's 2,300 meters above sea level. And it's where a lot of Indians go to see snow for the first time in their lives. You know, people come up here from Tamil Nadu, they are never going to see snow down there. So they come up to Srinagar and they go walking in the snow. There is a gondola lift that takes you to, I think, probably the highest gondola lift in the world. It takes you to 4,100 meters. We even took a ski trip there a couple of times. One of them was led by our good friend Konrad Bartelski, who any of you that were into skiing in the, I'm guessing, kind of late 80s will know Konrad from becoming second at Val Gardena in the World Cup downhill. So he's a bit of a legend, and he took a group up there and they had a wonderful week skiing. And then outside you have all the references back to the earlier times, the pre-Mogul times, where the area was ruled by both the Hindus and the Buddhists, and the 9th century Avantipur temples, which are not that far from Srinagar itself, a little bit further afield, the 6th century amazing Martam Sun Temple. You've also got more Mogul gardens. Verinag Mogul Gardens was Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal's favorite garden. This was where they used to hang out. So again, beautiful gardens further afield. You can go water trekking, which is a fun thing to do, which is basically what the Brits did 150 years ago. You take the shikaras, you paddle upstream, you go to different lakes like Manisbal Lake, so you can see life along the river as you go. Very gentle, very easy way to trek. Or you can go for a slightly more adventurous trek by actually walking. Aru to Sonamarg is a really good route. That's about 4 days. And that takes you over the high mountains where you can see how the local Kashmiris live up in the hills. We can even do that on a luxury basis. There's some really good products now where we can put you in really nice tents. We get a chef up there, we get musicians up there, and you can spend the night up in the wilds enjoying all that beautiful scenery. Or you can hit the road. Now, at this stage, of course, well, Kashmir, or Srinagar, I should say, is kind of connected both to the north and to the south. So to the south, you are coming from Jammu in the kind of lower part of Kashmir, and below that kind of Amritsar. If you head northeast, you're going to come up to over the passes to Leh. And that is the focus of our main tour to Kashmir. It's called the High Road to Kashmir. You fly into Leh in Ladakh, which of course is a very different world, the Buddhist world, the mountain deserts. You spend about a week there before you go on what will undoubtedly be the most spectacular road trip of your lives as you travel past Lamayuru, over the Zojila, all the way down to Srinagar. Now, I just want to say July, the trip is guaranteed. There are, I think, 6 people on that trip now. So, but if you want to get on that trip, do get your skates on, because you need to get your visa. So if you're coming from Britain and you're British, you'd need to make a decision on that by probably end of next week in order to get your visa in time. August, there are only 2 places left. So that trip's going almost full. And then we put on another departure in September. And September's a beautiful month to be doing this trip. The leaves are starting to turn. It's a gorgeous time to be there. So what you will see on that trip is everything I've shown you so far in Srinagar, and Kashmir, but you will be juxtaposing that with the extraordinary Buddhist world up in Ladakh. So top right, you can see is the Nubra Valley. For those of you that have been to Pakistan or know Pakistan, where I'll be in a week or so's time, if you go north up that valley, kind of directly up the flagpole, you will come out into Skardu. So that gives you an idea of your kind of geography, whereabouts you are. Lamayuru Monastery, bottom right, you will go and see some of the monks doing their morning prayers, and then Tiksay Monastery, top left. And one of the real highlights is going to Rangdum Monastery, which is a more spectacular setting, I think would be hard to find. The other great trip we do to Kashmir is called the Karakoram Adventure, 21 days, June, August, and September departures. However, given where China is at the moment with COVID, I would say start looking at that for 2023. I think it's unlikely that we'll be running this in 2022, sadly, because it starts in Kashgar, has the most monumental road trip over the highest motorable road in the world, in the Kunjarab Pass, down through Hunza and Islamabad to Lahore, cross over to Amritsar, where you'll go and see the Golden Temple, and then up to Srinagar. So this is a wonderful cultural, geographical, scenic, epic odyssey, really. The Sunday market in Kashgar, beautiful Wazir Khan Mosque in Lahore, the Golden Temple in Amritsar, and of course the sites of Hunza as well as the beauty of Kashmir. So that's a great trip, and of course all the while you're traveling along the epic Karakoram Highway, the eighth wonder of the world, which runs 1,250 kilometers from Kashgar to Abbottabad and kind of Islamabad. Other destinations, so very quickly, I'll quickly whip through this. We're seeing really good numbers going to Central Asia now, Uzbekistan, particularly Kyrgyzstan, a lot of people going to the Middle East, Jordan, Oman, Botswana and Namibia are having something of a resurgence, and our walking trips in Europe are doing really well, Italy particularly. So that's a great trip. If you don't want to go so far afield this year, the Apennines in Italy is just wonderful. Walking and wine there, fabulous trip. Don't forget about Wild Frontiers TV, where you can see a lot of our new videos. I just put one up on a guide to Sri Lanka. That's obviously going through some problems at the moment, but things are starting to look a little bit more optimistic there. And I think by Christmas, that will be a really great destination to go to. If you'd like to follow me on my trip to Pakistan next week, then please do. This is the homepage of our website. You'll find a picture there. It may not be that picture because that says Johnny's recent trip to India and Sri Lanka. They may put a picture up of me in Pakistan, I suspect. But click on that, both if you want to follow me in Pakistan and if you want to see all the videos, blogs, tweets, etc. that I did while I was in Kashmir and Sri Lanka. So I took something like 17 or 18 video blogs. So you can see a lot of little videos, vignettes of Kashmir. So do go there. Also my blogs on Kashmir and also everything on Sri Lanka. So that should be of interest to you. If you want a Zoom consultation with one of our travel consultants, please get in touch. As you know, we run trips to about 85 destinations. We have the Wild Frontiers Foundation. If you feel like giving a donation, that would be wonderful because we used to make money from these events live. We haven't been able to do that. So I'll be going back up to our school. I'm taking a load of things up there and want to see all the kids. So again, tune into that and you'll be able to see how the school's getting on. Still operating on a lower deposit, £200, $250, 20% tailor-made adventures. And we're still having our COVID promise, which basically means if a trip can't go because of COVID, you get your money back. Maximum group size 12, tour leaders and local guides, interesting and comfortable accommodation and transport. Everything's on a full board basis, so almost all meals included, COVID health and safety protocols. And as far as Tailor-Made is concerned, we have a full team of travel consultant experts who can help you plan your perfect trip. And of course, we are ATOL protected. Goodness, so that is me saying all that. I am now going to stop sharing my screen and ask Mike to come back on and hopefully throw me a couple of questions.
Wow, that was great, Johnny. Thanks very much for that. I know it's not easy presenting on your own, but you did a sterling job there. So on to the Q&As. We've had some great questions in already, but it's not too late to submit your own question if you'd like to ask Jonny anything. You can just probably see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you just click on that, you can type a question and we'll try and get through as many as we can.
Yeah, and do make the questions about anything. They don't have to be about Ladakh and Kashmir. You can ask me whatever you like.
That's a great opportunity to find out whatever you want from Jonny.
I may not answer, of course, but I will try.
So the first question is from Anonymous, actually, but she's asking what the temperatures are like in October, November. Would you need a light jacket in the evening?
God, do you know, this is it's a very good question. I went up there in March and I knew it was going to be hot in Rajasthan, but just for Kashmir, I took long johns, thick socks and a puffer jacket. It was 32 degrees. I didn't get any of it out. So I've always felt October is a wonderful time to be up in the Himalayas. September, October, and early November are great times to be up in the Himalayas, whether that's the Karakoram, the Hindu Kush, or the Himalayas. Srinagar, beautiful at that time of year. I've been up there in October. You get crisp mornings. You know, it does get a bit chillier at night, but what they often do in the houseboats is they put little stoves in the houseboats, so to keep you warm. You can they often give you the Kashmiri shawls, which are really nice to wear. The skies are generally really clear. No, it's a really nice time to go.
Great, thanks, Jonny.
But I wouldn't go too much into November. The trees are starting to lose their leaves, and then Srinagar becomes a little bit kind of, well, not quite as pretty.
Fair enough. So a couple of people have asked, Teresa and who else? Pamela have just asked, given the size of the lake, are mosquitoes a problem in Kashmir?
No, I think it's really too high. You just don't get any mosquitoes. I don't think I've ever seen a mosquito in Srinagar. I certainly didn't get bitten, and I hate getting bitten. Down country, of course, you've got to be more careful, but no, mosquitoes not an issue up there.
Okay, that's a real bonus then.
Yeah.
Another anonymous viewer is just asking what the elevation of Ladakh is. Would it be difficult for people with respiratory issues?
Okay, so Ladakh, you do have to be a bit careful. So when you fly into Leh, if you're flying in from Delhi, which is most likely, you go from 400 meters above sea level to 3,500 meters above sea level. Now, it's unusual that anybody will have any serious problems, but what you really need to do there is rest up for a couple of days. And our itinerary, our high road to Kashmir, deliberately starts slow, and you spend quite a lot of time just in and around Leh, looking at the local monasteries and palaces. You don't eat heavy food, so you don't eat a whopping great steak, you know, which can affect altitude sickness. So you take it easy and you slowly kind of get to the rhythm, and then it's no problem. You know, for asthmatics and things, I would get advice of a doctor, but we've taken many people on this trip and we haven't had problems. If you're driving there, which you do on the journey to Ladakh, again, we take it quite easy so that you're kind of you know, you're taking it slower, so you're acclimatizing as you go. But it is something to bear in mind, yes, where it's not in Srinagar.
Great. Okay. Charles asks, I would be a solo traveler. What are the clientele like? Couples, ages, international? It's a real mixture, really, isn't it, John?
Well, yeah, Mike, you could answer that as well as me. You know, our average age is probably around 52, 53. We usually have one or two couples, but we're largely made up of solo travelers. And I would say the ratio is about, it's not as split as it used to be. It's probably about 60-40 women to men. So it's a really big range. Given how Wild Frontiers has developed over the years, we do also have more of an international makeup often. I mean, the majority is usually Brits, but we do usually have Australians, Americans, Canadians. So it's a really good mishmash. And if you are a solo traveler wanting to, you know, go to these places, it's a really good option. And I'm not just saying that about Wild Frontiers. There are other companies as well, but it is a really good way to travel. You meet like-minded people. I have got so many of my best friends that are people I've met on Wild Frontiers trips that we've all kept in touch, and not only kept in touch, we've become great mates. And that's a really nice element of traveling as part of a group.
Yeah, definitely. Corinne has a question about whether we could organise one of the train journeys, such as the Palace on Wheels, for her, and add on some kind of extra sightseeing around either side of it.
Yeah, we do that. Shalmali is so Shalmali is our resident India travel consultant expert. We've often done the Palace on Wheels. There are various routings and there are various trains. Best to get in touch with Shalmali. We'll put this information in the email tomorrow. Shalmali's been on holiday the last couple of weeks, but she's back on Monday, so she would be able to talk you through the Palace on Wheels and what additional tailor-made trip you could do as part of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, we'll include Shamala's details in that email. Ellen is asking if there are any inoculations necessary for Kashmir.
Nope. I don't even think I don't think there are any for India. No. I mean, one should always keep up to date with the basics, but no, there's no particular inoculations.
Great.
Other than COVID, of course.
COVID, yes, of course. June is an adventurous traveller. She's saying, are your trips okay for seniors approaching 90?
Wow. Well, I guess that depends on the 90-year-old. How wonderful that we should even get a question like that. We have taken people in their 90s on certain trips. I remember we took this lovely chap to Iran, didn't we, Mike? Who was in his early 90s. Yeah. Where there's a will, there's a way. So get in touch and we'll talk you through it.
Great. Question from Raymond saying, hello from Lisbon. Thank you for the great presentation. Do you travel the Wakhan corridor and the southern part of the Taklamakan Desert?
Yes.
We used to do the Wakhan, didn't we, and the Taklamakan?
Well, I mean, technically we still do. We've had to suspend the Wakhan certainly for 2022 because of the political situation in Afghanistan. And we are kind of waiting for the dust to settle before we decide on whether we put the trip on for next year. So at the moment we have, I think, 2 pretty much full groups for 2023, or if they're not full, they're pretty near full. And the southern part of the Taklamakan, we do part, I think the itinerary does part of the southern route. So it kind of cuts across the Taklamakan. Don't quote me on this because I haven't looked at the itinerary for a little while, but it definitely goes to Hotan, which is on the southern side, but it does also go to Dunhuang and Turpan on the northern side. So I think we cut through and end up in Kashgar. But just go to, sorry, was it Raymond?
Yes.
Yeah, Raymond, just go to the website, have a look at destinations, go to China, and you'll see a trip there, group tour called the Taklamakan Adventure, I think, isn't it? Something like that.
That's right. The Taklamakan Adventure, exactly, yeah.
Yep.
So Mary has asked, she's very interested in the fact we provide solo travel opportunities. Is that to all of our destinations? And do we combine solo travelers with couples? She very much appreciates solo travel opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, solo travel is kind of the nature of our game as far as the group travel is concerned. Obviously, just to explain to our viewers, 50% of our business is groups and 50% is tailor-made. So the tailor-made side is often couples, families, that sort of thing. The groups is pretty much always made up of at least 70%, 75% solo travelers. So that can be 2 friends traveling together. There can be husband and wives traveling together, but the majority are individuals coming to us because they, have a desire to go to a place where they don't have a friend that wants to go there as well, or the timings don't work or whatever. That's how companies like Wild Frontiers exist, really.
Yeah. Great. Another anonymous is asking about the food. So what do you recommend to eat in India and where? So what kind of places to go to have meals? I mean, the food's a real highlight, isn't it, in India?
Absolutely. I mean, where do you start? Personally, I love street food, and I eat a lot of street food in India. That would worry some people, and I do understand the kind of hygiene elements of it. I've been going there for so long that I've probably built up some sort of tolerance, but I love the street food. And in fact, often the street food is healthier than some of the hotel food, to be honest. I mean, it's bubbling away. They put it into a very hygienic banana leaf bowl, you know, a kind of chana masala with a fresh bread. It's absolutely delicious. Then again, nowadays, there are some fabulous restaurants where you can eat fine dining. So there's pretty much everything in between. So yeah, Kashmir, India generally is not a place you're going to go hungry. It's a treat. In fact, you'll probably come home with a few extra pounds.
Absolutely. Sue is going on the High Road to Kashmir trip in August, but wonders what you would advise to take. I'm assuming she's talking clothing, but there may be other things that we recommend.
Is that Sue?
Yes, Sue, yeah.
Sue, great. Well done for signing up. You're going to have a trip of a lifetime. It is truly one of our best trips, I think. In terms of clothing, you know, what you would take for a normal adventure of this sort. So, you know, kind of adventure trousers, fleeces, tops, but also you might want to take a kind of longish skirt. You know, you can wear t-shirts in Ladakh, you can wear t-shirts in Kashmir. To be honest, there's not really, you don't want to wear anything too skimpy, obviously. But you know, the Buddhist people of Ladakh are fairly conservative as well. So just bear that in mind. But other than that, you know, pretty much what you would take for the Highlands of Scotland in midsummer, I would say, without the midge net.
Got an interesting question from another viewer here asking, does the icon of the Wild Frontiers logo have any meaning or represent anything? And there is a story there.
What a great question. Well, some of the team think it looks like a chicken being hung, but actually when you see the logo animated, it's supposed to represent mountains and a waterfall. Yeah, and I think the sunrise as well, isn't it? It's the sunrise, mountains, and a waterfall, making up one.
And a W and an F, of course, yeah.
And of course, a W and an F, yeah. So that was the kind of motivation behind it. Thank you for asking.
Suzanne is wondering, says, thanks for a very enjoyable webinar. What are the chances of having a German-speaking guide in Pakistan on a tailor-made trip?
I think that's doable. Certainly French and Spanish, and I would imagine there are German guides as well. So that would again be a question for Shalmali, because there will be German-speaking guides. Absolutely, no question. There are plenty of German tourists going to India all the time, so there would certainly be Indian German-speaking guides. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we could help with that.
Yeah.
Neil's going to Pakistan on our Pagan Moon trip in December, and he noticed that you're traveling there next week. Is it open for business, Pakistan, now? Is that trip likely to take place?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. I think there are 10 people booked up on that trip. So, sorry, what was the name of the chap?
Neil.
Neil, well done you. You've signed up with the Wakhan corridor not going at the moment for probably our most adventurous trip, I should think. Well, that or the Congo and maybe a couple of others. You're going to have an extraordinary time. Going up to see the Kalash for their Festival of Chalmos is one of the most extraordinary events. It's one of the most privileged kind of things I've ever seen. It's really spectacular. It's tough. It can be cold, but it's really, really special. It is definitely going. The only reason why it hasn't been guaranteed yet is simply because we've got so many trips we're trying to guarantee at the moment that we simply haven't got round to guaranteeing December trips. But it is definitely going. So talk to our team, our operations team, but it's 100% going. So you'll have an extraordinary time up there at that time of year.
Absolutely. John's just got a question here. If you've been to Pakistan and have a stamp in your passport, could that present a problem entering Kashmir?
No, absolutely no issue at all. I've got a passport stuffed full of Pakistan and Indian visas, and it's no issue at all.
Yeah, great. Claire has a kind of a general question about how fit you need to be to go on our trips.
Well, again, I mean, it slightly depends on the trip, but they are not, you know, Yeah, it depends on the trip, but you don't need to be kind of, marathon fit. You just need to be, I would say, travel robust. So, for example, if you're doing the Karakoram adventure, there's no huge walks over mountains on that trip, but it's quite a tough trip because it's a long journey, and therefore you need to kind of steel yourself and have some fortitude for it's more that sort of, it's more mental fitness almost than physical fitness. On the other hand, some of the walking trips in Europe require a certain amount of physical fitness, but generally speaking, no, these trips are cultural adventures that are there to go and see and visit local people, visit local communities, see how people live, see great landscapes, eat interesting food, learn about history. They're not about marching over mountains.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a question from Laura just about the makeup of our groups. Just wondering, would our trips be okay for families with teenagers, 15 and 18-year-old, for example?
Yes, at that age, that should be fine. I mean, we don't generally take what I would call children on the group trips because it kind of it's a very different kind of situation, but we 15 and 18 should be fine. And also don't forget, and you may well want your kids to interact with a group, which is great, which I totally understand, and that could be fine. The other thing to mention, of course, is that we run a full tailor-made service. So if you wanted to go just with your family or with another family that are friends of yours, then we would arrange that on a personal basis. Yeah.
And there's just a nice comment, it's not a question here, from Roz, just saying, hi, Johnny, just wanted to say you brought back some wonderful memories. Seeing a photo of our group on the houseboat on Dal Lake from 2004, and we're desperate to go back. That's Roz and Richard.
Yeah, Roz and Richard Hanlon. Hi, guys. Long time no see. Goodness me. They were on a really, so I'll tell you very briefly about their trip. So we were up in Pakistan in October, and we got caught out in a massive snowstorm. And I've taken many groups up to Pakistan in October, and it's always been beautiful weather. This particular time, and everything got snowed in. We couldn't get in, we couldn't get out. We eventually managed to get a plane out and flew back down to Delhi, which meant they missed a whole lot of Hunza. So the next year we put together this trip where we went from Hunza down to Lahore, cross over Amritsar, and up to Srinagar. And it was a big old journey, but we had a lot of fun doing it. So great to hear from you guys.
Brilliant. Jason's just asking about, they've booked Taj Temples and Tigers, but if that doesn't run, what alternative trip would we recommend? They only have 2 weeks.
India in slow motion. Absolutely, definitely. I mean, Taj Temples and Tigers is a wonderful trip because it takes in slightly more of the highlights of Rajasthan. But I would imagine there's every chance that trip will run. I would be surprised if it doesn't. But India in slow motion, the November departure is great. I mean, both departures are great, but the November one has the Chandrabhaga Camel Fair, which is really spectacular. So yeah, India in slow motion, or Heart of India would be another really good one. But yeah, I would say India in slow motion. Well, you saw in the presentation that was it. Brilliant. I think we're coming almost towards the end, aren't we, Mike?
We are. Yeah, I know you've earned a break, Johnny. Just 2 more questions. One is the high road covers 2 different festivals. What are those festivals like, or what's the difference? Can you describe them?
Sorry, say that again.
The high road to Kashmir, they cover 2 different festivals.
Well, the festivals are incredibly similar. They're both the Buddhist festivals. Each monastery will have a time where it runs its festival, and they're Techu festivals, and they tell the story of the Buddha through dancing and mime and big masks and all of this. And so they're very similar. So it's simply that, one's at one time of year and one's at another. I've just thought of something as well. Somebody asking about the fitness level. Do bear in mind that each of the group tours actually has a kind of fitness rating and an explanation as to what each trip requires from you. So they're fairly good at explaining what kind of level of fitness you need.
Great. And finally, one from Karen saying, how do we get in touch with Wild Frontiers? Well, Karen, you'll be receiving an email from us tomorrow since you registered for this webinar, and we'll include lots of contact details and that, lots of information for you, and we'll include Shalmarli's contact details as well, so you'll just be able to drop her a line and she'll be able to help you with any inquiries you might have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the Q&A. So thanks very much. Some really great questions, and well done, Johnny. Yeah. That was a brilliant presentation. Clearly inspired a lot of people.
Great to have great to have people so interested and to ask so many questions. That's really gratifying. So thank you everyone very much for listening. Thank you, Mike, very much for pulling all those questions together. And this will be the last webinar that we give for the summer. So we're going to leave you all alone for a bit. But we will be back in the autumn, no doubt, with more of these webinars. So thank you all very much for watching, and yeah, have a great summer. See you in the autumn. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.